A lot of Trump in today's news. First off, Trump has tweeted out that he wants to cut aid to certain Central American countries because of the caravan migration that's going on right now as they advance through Mexico. And his administration is going to do something extremely controversial, according to the left, by changing and narrowing the definition of gender. So we will start off today's episode by diving into the caravan that's coming in from Honduras, is where most of the people were migrating from. Now, one of the main reasons they were migrating is violence. Another main reason some of these people are migrating was due to unemployment. Now, the former, I agree with. Violence, they should be able to come over here and seek asylum and protection if their country has lost control. If their government has lost control of the country and it is not safe for civilians to be there, then yes, that is what the program we have set up for asylum seekers is for people who need it and to get out of their country. However, it is not for people to come over here and look for work when they're not legal citizens. That means that they will be, in a way, predicated or prioritized over you and I, people who were born here. We're natural born citizens. So that could hinder work for you and I. It can lower wages because they'll work for less money. And not only that, but it just doesn't qualify as seeking asylum. That's not our job to find employment for people in other countries. That's their country's job. And not only that, but we're giving hundreds of millions of dollars to Honduras, Guatemala, and Ecuador so that way they can become self-sufficient and maintain their population and help their country develop into something that's prosperous and people want to stay and live there and it's a happy place. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help them out. However, as Trump pointed out very well in his tweet, I think, it states the following. This was at this morning, 8:57. Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador were not able to do the job of stopping people from leaving their country and coming to the U.S. illegally. We will now begin cutting off or substantially reducing the massive foreign aid routinely given to them. And in a tweet prior to that was earlier, he stated the Mexican government and military, the Mexican police and military essentially failed to keep this caravan from coming through, which they did. They did. The caravan forced their way through. And not only that, but when it first started, it had 200 people. And as it progressed, it grew by more than 10 times. It has over 2,000 people in the caravan now. Some estimates of 5,400 people are in the caravan now. That's a little suspicious how it's increasing as it goes through the countries. Not only that, but another thing that's truly suspicious about this, not suspicious, but, well, no, suspicious is the right word. They are carrying a Honduras flag in the front of this caravan. Why would you be representing a country that you're fleeing from? If you love your country so much, you would stay there. For instance, I disagree with what a lot happens, with what's going on in America for a lot of different reasons. Whether it be, the way we are conflating everybody on the right to be fascist or the attacks on free speech. But those things don't make me want to leave America. They make me want to stay here and try to help and be on the righteous side, I guess you could say, in trying to regain some stability. Even though I may have a small voice, it doesn't matter, but that's what I'll try to do. It's not as if our country is falling apart and I need to run away from here because it's no longer functional. And if that was the case, I definitely wouldn't be supporting an American flag as I go through another country that's going to be accepting me so that way I can have a better life. It just doesn't make too much sense to me why they are carrying that flag, nor does it make sense to me why we're encouraging people to come over here simply because they're unemployed. So, with that, the Homeland Security Secretary made out a statement today on Twitter, and it said the following: while we closely monitor the caravan crisis, we must remain mindful of the transportational criminal organizations and other criminals that prey on the vulnerabilities of those undertaking the irregular migration, referring to people who are in the cartel, drug trafficking. They can definitely slip through getting in illegal substances through the border by having large groups of people go together. And human trafficking can take place as well. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong and actually hurt some of these people migrating to America or attempting to migrate to America, even though the Mexican government did not want them to enter, nor does our government right now want them to enter, but they still went against the Mexican government's orders and basically forced their way through Mexico. And this is a little frightening to think that we're talking about people who have no respect for law. And if they can't obey a law in a country like Mexico, not demeaning Mexico, but Mexico isn't the United States of America. It's not some place where most people would want to go and live, because there's a lot of crime over there and there's a lot of corruption within their government. Now, there is corruption within our government, but for the most part, actually, our society is is completely functional. For the most part, we don't ever see anything horrible happening unless you go to the few and far in between areas in our country that are littered with criminals and just low economic status people, which is a very unfortunate situation. But point I'm getting at is that it's the anomaly in America for bad things like that to occur, which happen frequently over in Mexico because of the cartel controlling most of the country. So if a country like that isn't being respected and these migrants are just forcing their way through here, what makes us think that the United States, they would show any respect to the United States? That's something I don't understand, and yet we still are praising them to come through, even though we don't know everybody who's on there. Now, most certainly there are people who are truly fleeing from violence. There are people who are trying to escape some devilish lifestyle that was going on back in their homeland. I'm sure this is true, and I'm sure that there are some, if not most, of these people looking for a better life. I'm sure of it. However, that does not excuse the fact that there will be people on there that are going to want to do harm and come over here for illegal activities. And there's going to be people over here who don't have any other reason to come here other than trying to find employment because they didn't work in their country, or they didn't want to work in their country, or they thought they'd have it better in America if they came and work in America, which is true. But in that case, go about it in a legal route. If you're not in danger, if you're not around violence, and the only reason you're fleeing is because of employment, well then make sure you do that legally. That is one thing I don't have any tolerance for, because then you're just taking away jobs from citizens, and then you're lowering wages for citizens as well. So the people who are coming in this migration for unemployment, I don't agree with. People who are fleeing due to violence and things of that nature, I do agree with. However, how do you navigate that? How do you figure out who's who in that situation? You don't, which is why you have to take extreme precautions in this type of scenario. And I don't think President Trump was too harsh when he said that he was going to cut or significantly reduce the funding given to these countries because they're failing their jobs. And he did state that they're failing their jobs. And we've been giving hundreds of millions of dollars to them for a while now, and they still are not able to help cultivate a productive and family-oriented society. So if they're not able to do that with the help we've given them already, when will they be able to truly break their cycle of corruption and develop a society in which people want to live in, and develop a country in which people want to live in. That doesn't seem to be happening, and that's why they're fleeing. And it's growing as well. And why is it growing? That's another thing. And so there's a lot going on here with this migration, these refugees coming through, and it's happening all over the world right now. We have a case in Spain where I believe hundreds, if not thousands, of migrants ambushed their borders, jumping over fences, throwing stones at the border patrol, throwing feces at the border patrol. So we don't know if some of those people who are doing that, may share some commonality. There may be some commonality between the two migrant groups, is what I'm trying to say. We don't know that. And how do we figure that out? I don't know what the answer is. However, I don't think President Trump is doing a bad job at the way he's handling it. I think he is being strong and assertive with how he wants to make sure our country is safe, and we don't allow people like the migrants in Spain that are completely disrespecting the government and forcing their way in. And these migrants did the same. I don't know about the throwing feces or stones, but they forced their way into Mexico. And they say they are determined to reach the United States, although our government says they're not allowed. And we're not taking them. We don't want that to happen. The government doesn't. So there's a lot of suspicious things going on with this caravan, a lot of questions to be answered, and we'll just keep updated on it and make sure to report as we receive updates. Now, moving on to something almost probably more controversial than the latter topic, and that is the Trump administration is trying to redefine, I'm using quotation marks for those that are listening, because that's what the left considers what he's doing with the word gender, his administration, which is they want to give it a more narrow definition. And this is the definition that they want to give it. Sex means a person's status as male or female based on immutable biological traits indefinable by or before birth. The department proposed in a memo according to the Times. Then it goes into another quote. The sex listed on a person's birth certificate as originally issued shall constitute definitive proof of a person's sex unless rebutted by reliable genetic evidence, which is 100% right. What they're doing right here is just applying biology to the definition of the word gender. People who believe gender isn't binary is either willfully ignorant to science or truly unable to comprehend that concept right there. Those are the only two things I can think of. Or being brainwashed, I guess, and just following the crowd. So if you're a left-leaning person and all you do is consume left-leaning news, and this is the kind of material that you're seeing, the left, the Democrats are pushing, then yeah, you're going to tend to believe this and not want to go against it because that's your worldview, and that's the way you categorize things, is in the boxes of which your party puts them in for you. So it's a script that you follow because it gives you a sense in life. It gives you a meaning, so to speak, that you're doing something right. Virtue signaling, which is really what a lot of this is. However, point being is that there should be no outrage for this. The reason there should be no outrage for this is that we're just sticking to the facts. That's all we're doing. And even if there was a way for you to differentiate between sex and gender, then you would have to change the language. And you would have to completely reword everything we do. Not everything, but a lot of things we say and read as a nation. The way we use our language would have to be reorganized. For instance, they're trying to add gender-neutral pronouns that just haven't caught on. Why haven't they caught on? Because people are not stupid. The vast majority of Americans are aware that you cannot separate sex and gender. For instance, my parents, my mom and my dad, they are both left-leaning individuals. My dad is, I would say, pretty left-leaning. He is a staunch Democrat. He considers himself a liberal. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I have nothing against that. And point being, the reason I bring this up is that he would not buy into this because he knows this is BS, even though he agrees with the Democratic Party more so than the Republican Party. And they both strongly dislike Trump. But I guarantee you, they would both agree with what he's doing here because this is just common sense. I can't switch to a female because I feel that that's my identity. I can't all of a sudden have periods and give birth and magically create a vagina and make my penis disappear. I can't do those things. I don't have an XX chromosomes. I don't have that. That's not me. I'm a male, so I can't just switch because of how I feel. Obviously, there are people, though, who have gender dysphoria or transgenderism, or transgender, which you can use whatever name you prefer. But, of course, those people have difficulties with coming to terms with who they are as an individual because sex does play a role in it. And for most people, for 99% of the population, we don't have an issue understanding who we are from a sexual standpoint, a sex standpoint. We understand that, okay, well, I have these biological traits, therefore I'm a man, or I have these biological traits, and therefore I'm a woman. There is less than 0.5% of the nation who suffer from transgenderism or gender dysphoria. Just a small percentage of them. Not saying they don't count, but we can't go about changing the structures of a society when the vast majority of people do not have these issues. So you're benefiting not even 1% of the country, and you're disenfranchising or forcing everybody else in the country to adapt to a way where things won't be offensive for people who most of us will never encounter. Not saying this to disenfranchise transgender people, not saying this to criticize them by any means. Actually, I've heard reports and read articles that there are some transgender people who are completely against what's going on right now with the way the left is using transgender people as a political tool to be able to compel speech. There are transgender people who are realizing what's going on, and they understand that gender isn't non-binary. It is binary. They understand that. They understand that they were just dealt a bad hand, and that there are some things that are unfortunately out of their control, and they suffer, from this mental illness. And that's what it is. I'm not being offensive. I'm just calling it how it actually is, and it is a mental illness. And these people do need help, and they do, need attention, so that way we can try to figure out what's causing these high suicide rates amongst transgender people. But simply changing the definition of a word, not even changing a definition, just correcting the definition of a word, will not disenfranchise people. That won't solve all their issues. That won't help decrease rates in suicide. So this, I think, is just silliness and foolish. And it's in its attempt to compel language. That's really what it is. And not only that, but the reason this is also frightening is that children, teenagers, are actually claiming to be transgender just to try and be different, because it's the new thing in the media right now. Actually, an article from the Daily Wire covers this topic that I'm referring to right now, as far as teenagers trying out transgender to fit in. And her name is, or his name, sorry, Dr. Stefan Status, basically issued a warning of overdiagnosing of trans youth, claiming many of the children and teens he sees at his Australian-based gender clinic are not actually suffering from gender dysphoria or transgenderism, but are instead trying to become trans because it's trendy, wishing to gain attention from their peers. So we have children who are now doing this to fit in, and that's sad, because that means you are discrediting cases of real transgender people who are suffering with this mental illness. You're discrediting them. You are saying that anybody can do it. You are saying that this is a choice. That's what that's implying. And by narrowly defining the definition, I think would also help deter some of this foolish teenage behavior. Now, we can't really blame the teenagers in this case. Obviously, they know right from wrong, but you remember when you were a teenager. I made so many stupid mistakes as a teenager. I did so many things that I would never imagine doing now that I look back at and I'm like, what the hell? I'm sure you all have that same, have those same memories as well when you were a teenager. You knew right from wrong, and for whatever reason you decided to do the complete opposite of what was logical to do. I'm sure we've all done it, and I'm sure we've all done things as kids to try to fit in. For instance, one of the biggest things I did as a teenager to fit in, I grew up in a very rural area, and I hung out with a bunch of buddies who were, really grew up in the country. I grew up in the country, but they actually were real, I would say they were more, they were country boys, right? So hung out with them, and some of them dipped. A lot of them dipped. A lot of the people I hung out with back home dipped. They chewing tobacco. And watching this, I was just fascinated. It looked cool. And I was thinking, my buddies are doing it, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. Even though I knew that, hey, mouth cancer could come from it. I can get throat cancer. I'm going to be spending money left and right. But guess what? My buddies are doing it, so I'll do it. And I got addicted. I was addicted for a few years, actually. I started chewing when I was 16, stopped chewing after I moved to Ohio. Moved to Ohio when I was 19, and so I stopped chewing at about 20, 21 years old. So I chewed for about 4 or 5 years. And the only reason I did it was because I was stupid trying to fit in. Now, obviously, this is a totally different scenario, but point being is that as teenagers, we do stupid things to fit in. So in this case right here, people trying to fit in by claiming and faking that they're transgender takes away from people who actually suffer from this mental illness. So, yeah, I agree with what Trump did here. So both things that Trump has done that are considered controversial, I agree with. And the last thing to tie this all together, although there's so much controversy going on with President Trump right now, with the caravan to the gender definition, he has a higher poll rating right now than Barack Obama did at the same amount of time in office. So entering the midterms, President Obama had a 45% approval rating. Entering the midterms for Trump right now, he has a 47% approval rating. And this is from The Hill. Now, the Republicans, however, are trailing the Democrats in the midterms right now by 9 points. But there are some key Democratic senators, such as Bernie Sanders, who aren't so sure the blue wave will come as they don't think that it will come crashing in and taking over the House, essentially, as the media may portray. That's what Bernie Sanders thinks, that it isn't. He doubts it. He doubts the blue wave, although they have the lead right now. But there are some doubts within the party itself. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what exactly happens here with the midterms. So don't forget to go out and vote. Make sure you do your research. I implore you all to do research before you vote. And make sure you're voting on who you think is best for not only you and your family, but for your state, personally. I would put aside party affiliation and focus on who's the best person. Who do you like? Who has values that you can respect? And be truly objective to what you're hearing, and make sure that you're getting both sides of the story, and not just one. Not just, we're voting for this because of this. Find out why you shouldn't vote for it as well. So that way you're educated all around. Even if you don't agree why you shouldn't vote for something, at least you know why people aren't voting for it, which then gives you a better understanding of the people you live with as a whole. So that's in my opinion, what will bring back civility in America. Is not saying it's all gone, but it's walking a thin line right now. And if we really just take the time to listen to each other and understand each other's points of views and positions, we'll realize that there's a lot more in common than we disagree with. So I hope you all enjoyed the episode. I hope you all have a wonderful Monday. And let's keep kicking this week's ass. All right, we'll be back tomorrow. Peace.